Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Berezina. This is Laws of Achievement. And today I'm talking to another Anna Berezina. Originally from Siberia, she now lives in Boston, Massachusetts. Her passion is hosting large public events, often combining them with her love for home cooking. She brings people together over food, creating community wherever she is. How she accomplishes all of this, and much more, is in this conversation. If you like what you hear, like, share, subscribe, comment, ask questions. I want to know what you want to know. Hi, everyone. Here with me is a longtime friend of mine, Anna Berezina. Besides the first name, we also share some common background. We both are alumni of an amazing program, Freedom Support Act, FSA, later renamed into FLEX, Future Leaders Exchange. Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, very glad to. Thank you for coming on. And tell us a little bit about this program and tell us how you became a part of it.
Yeah, Freedom Support Act, as you said that just now, I was like, wow, that sounds terrifying these days. But now, different times, different words. But Future Leaders Exchange, it was a program in the 90s that brought a lot of the high school kids from the former Soviet Union to the United States on an exchange program. And for me, I lived in Kansas for a year, yeah, right outside Wichita, Kansas, in a teeny tiny town called Andale, and I loved every minute of it. It was so good. And then I came back, and that's when I met you.
Yes, you were the mentor for the newer incoming people, definitely. How did you find out about this program?
I have no idea. I think I read about it in a newspaper. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anybody who went before me or anything. It was just like something I was like, oh, this looks kind of cool. Maybe I'll apply. And then after
Wow.
that, I met other people who've done it. But going in, I was like, I guess I know some English. Let's see what happens. That's how I ended up. And how about you?
I believe we were told about it in school.
Huh? That
Yeah,
was
our
like
teacher actually said, hey, this thing is happening. Whoever wants to go test their English, go test your English. And I went. Did you get in on the
that.
first try?
I did, yeah.
You did. And I think it was limited to how many times you could try, right? For me, it was two, and I actually got it on a second try.
Great. Yeah, it was. I remember there was this crazy interview, which I now know is like a typical American, probably like college interview, is what they asked us for. It's like, oh, like describe a problem that you solved. I'm like, all right,
And
let
none
me
of us were
count the ways.
prepared because we just didn't do this kind of things in our schools, right?
Absolutely not. No. Yeah.
It,
So,
it was really, you had to think on the spot and come up with this, right?
yeah,
But before
that's
the
it.
interview, I recall there were tests, right? I
Yeah,
think
there was
two
like
of
an
them.
English one and some sort of like vaguely multiple testy psychological one.
Yeah,
That was also completely nothing I've ever seen before.
exactly. Everything was so new. And the English one was kind of tough for me at that time. What was your English level?
For
Did you
me
find it
too,
tough?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I was even, I mean, my English, like, as I now know, was like pretty decent when I came to Kansas, but at the same time, it was pretty rough.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so Flex, I did some digging, right, just to beef up on the history a little bit. So apparently, Flex is still ongoing. The program itself is still ongoing. Yes. So it started in 1993, I believe, and it continued. Russia has dropped out a few years ago. I learned about it because I'm in the immigration law area. And so I've been following these developments. So what happened is one kid, one of the participants from Russia, asked for political asylum while here in the United States. And
Like a
based on that,
teenager, like a
a
high
teenager.
school. Oh,
Yes,
okay. Well, I
yes.
mean, could be valid. It could be anything.
LGBTQ grounds could be valid, definitely. So he asked for asylum. He ended up staying, and Russia stepped out from this program, which is really sad because it's a great program. In the meantime, I was wondering for a while how soon something like that was going to happen, because really it's just a matter of time until somebody figures out that it's a good way to come and ask for asylum, essentially.
So I have to ask you something. And
Mm.
have you, so every year I look into the Flex program and I'm like, could I take on a kid?
Hmm.
Because I'm like, like I'm old enough and I have the space, no, space-ish in considering Massachusetts. And I am so interested in that. And I kind of follow EF a little bit for that. And I'm just like, I would love to give somebody the opportunity that I was given and really, maybe it's just a month or something or a couple of weeks in the summer that the teenagers especially do the summer program.
Hmm.
That'd be so fun. That'd be so great.
Yeah, it would be, but I think if the goal is to introduce the kid to English language and culture, it will probably have to be someone not from a Russian-speaking
Yeah.
country,
Oh, completely.
right?
Yeah.
So you'll be
That's
forced to
fine. Yeah.
speak English, right?
hmm
No, I think it's a great idea and it could be fun,
I
right?
think it would be fascinating. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, why not? Right. But with Flex, I just want to tell the listeners, the viewers, Flex was really designed to introduce kids from the former Soviet Union to a typical American way of life, right? And that's why students were typically placed into smaller towns with very normal average families. And also, I want to point out the families were not compensated, right? Families were reimbursed some expenses, but not compensated for hosting a student. So I just, and I'm really grateful for all the people who signed up for it.
They
It's
just did
amazing.
it for the love.
Yes, and for the love, for the cultural exposure as well, to introduce their kids to somebody new. Absolutely. And to establish the long term ties. Did that happen in your case with your
Yeah,
family?
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just last year, the year before, my art teacher from Kansas was here in Boston with his wife, and we had dinner, and it was so funny because we took this picture, and I was like, it's been literally 20, more
20
than
years.
20 years, it's like,
Right.
it's so, so cool. So, and I'm still very close with my host family, and yeah, I love them. I still call my American mom mom. That's a
Mm-hmm.
whole that's a thing that we do. But
It
my
does
high
form
school
lifelong
was
friendships.
crazy. It was this I mean, now that I know like the range, right? Like I went to a very small school and they
Mm-hmm.
all went to kindergarten together, to middle school together, and my graduating class was fewer than 100 people. So it
Oh,
was
that is a
very,
tiny
very
school.
small. Yeah. And so now I look back at this and I'm like, what were they thinking?
How did they accept you, the students?
Well, my year, we had two two other exchange students,
Mm-hmm.
but I am fairly confident that that entire town has not seen like a foreign person before. So it was an interesting experience. It wasn't all like rainbows and unicorns necessarily, but I did enjoy it. Like at the end of the day, I really liked it.
Of
But I
course.
think the that was because of my host family largely. The high
Mm-hmm.
school was a little strange, but
Why?
then
Like,
now we're still all in touch, so it's good.
what seems strange to you?
I think it was just a little clicky,
Clicky?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Clicky
think is
compared,
every high school, but when you're also have the language barrier and the cultural
yes.
barrier, it seems a lot
Right.
more.
Talk a little bit more about the language barrier. Like how did it impact your life, like your functioning in the first, let's say, half year in the United States?
I believe in like kind of like a sink or swim approach with the language. And I think the less you speak Russian, right? Or your native language, whatever it is, the better your English is going to get. And I continued, even at 16 years old, I just continued to put myself in situations where I had to speak English. And I think that what helped me the most.
Well, I think the program was also designed to force us into this because I don't know
Exactly.
how it was in your area, but our student coordinator received complaints from the school if several of us exchange students were caught speaking Russian, and she
Oh
would
yeah,
then reprimand us, right? Because the
I've heard
purpose
of
of the
that. Look,
program.
there were no other Russian people like in the entire state
Okay.
of Kansas when I was there,
Okay.
so I was pretty safe from that one.
I had two more in my school, and yeah, we were strongly discouraged from ever speaking Russian. It was, yeah, we were supposed to just immerse ourselves.
And then when I came back, it was like 2002, I want to say. I watched a ton of TV and I read all the silly books to just learn conversational English, and that helped me a ton.
And so, how did you function in school with limited English?
Like high school,
Uh huh.
I mean, it was fine. I didn't feel like that was that much of a deterrent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I took sophomore year English. I did a bunch of art. It was fine. Yeah, that I don't think that really affected anything. It was more of a cultural situation. I remember
Mm.
I brought this like dress that I thought it was like the most amazing thing ever. And I wore it to school and I was like, "Oh, oh no."
No.
So and then I kind of learned to just, copy and learn from your surroundings.
Was your school a typical jeans and sneakers and hoodie kind of school?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of perms too. Like you wouldn't think that.
No.
1996, Kansas.
Huh.
Apparently
High
that's
school.
what we did.
Interesting. Yeah. For me, English was actually a problem. I struggled so much. I remember I was having migraines after a day in school.
But
It
your
was
English is
tough.
so good. I remember you in like ninth grade. Your English was perfect.
It was perfect, I guess, for Russia.
Yeah,
But
well,
it was British English, you know. I did not have much training in American English. It was all British and it was all very classy. And so when you go to rural South Carolina, it's not exactly what people speak. So it was quite an adjustment. But I discovered a very interesting thing about it when suddenly I realized I could understand algebra when explained in English, but I couldn't, like, for the love of my life, not understand algebra in Russia when it was taught to us. I think because the pace was different and the teacher really took time to explain things over and over. So overall, it was better. Did you have any
that's
kind of
really
discoveries?
that's really interesting. So, a friend of mine is a math teacher here in Boston in a public school, a high school math teacher, and her students sometimes are very recent immigrants, like 2 days ago arrived from Guatemala kind of immigrants, right? So it's like brand new. And sometimes, sure, her name is Marcy, but sometimes Marcy says, like, if I just switch to math language, it goes so much better
Mm-hmm.
because they actually know math. But there may be a word they don't understand in English. And the example that she gave was hysterical. It was carpet. It was something it was like a problem about like, I don't know, like units of something, whatever. And somebody thought that carpet was a pet that you keep in a car,
Oh, okay, that's cute.
which makes absolutely perfect sense,
It does. It absolutely does.
except that it's not carpet.
Right. But you know what? I can see that.
So there's that.
It's beautiful. So your English was sufficient to function in a high school in the United
Yeah, I
States.
was fine. The English was not my problem.
Okay. Well, let's talk about things that were a problem. What was the cultural things you're mentioning?
When I think in Russian high school, it's very like girly girl,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I was not kind of prepared for. And you know me, you've known me for so many years. I am not a particularly girly girl. However, apparently I am.
For the U.S. high school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not so much high school, but I'll give you an example for when I was working at the University of Illinois in early 2000s. And I was exiting a bus and I extended my hand like a princess. And it was so natural for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the person that exited the bus before me was like, what the hell is going on right now? So I always that's my perfect example of like nobody now in my like regular everyday life now expect me to do that, but I really thought that would be like, this is what we do now.
Okay, on a bus.
Yep,
Fun.
on a bus.
Okay.
Or I would sit in a car and wait for, if I was like with a male friend, not a date
Mm-hmm.
or anything, just
Right.
like a male friend, I would expect them to walk around and open the car door.
Right.
Or I would just sit there, just like
Mm-hmm.
no motion whatsoever, just hi.
How did people react? When I guess when you were in that exchange year, what kind of reactions did you get?
It was mixed. So some was fun, and we became great friends. There was quite a bit of bullying,
Oh,
and we look at it now with my friends that went to the same high school, and we're like, "What the hell happened?"
did you do any sports?
I tried, and then I realized the sports here are way more intense than the sports where we come from. So I did not. I just did painting and art and sculpture instead.
Oh, that's beautiful. And do you
Did you
find
do
art?
sports?
I did. I did track and field. It
Oh, that's
was
the one I tried.
that's the one you tried. Yeah, track and field in South Carolina is something else when you're coming from Siberia, and it was a very trying experience. But I finished the season. Although I'm
Amazing.
afraid I was more of a liability to my team than
I gave
anything.
up after one. I went out. It was like 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
okay, no thanks, bye bye.
Right.
That was the end of that.
No, I made it through, and it was very exciting. And yeah, I was the only white girl on the team. And I did catch some girls behind my back saying things like, "What is she doing here? She should be playing baseball." But I could never grasp the rules of baseball, but track and field was fairly simple. So, were there any habits that you learned that you felt were positive enough to learn and that helped you afterwards?
From the exchange year,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that speaking out again, like, and spelling things out. I even did this with my parents when I got back. Because I think in Russia we don't. Sometimes there are these like veiled messages, and I came back and I was
Context.
just like, oh no, this is we're just gonna really say it how it is.
And you all deal with it.
Yep, and
Mm.
then I still do it. Like my parents here now, they're brand new immigrants, and I'm kind of I'm teaching them a little bit of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you unlearn any habits from before?
Yeah, that extending my hand when exiting the bus.
Right.
Yeah, that would be the one.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
didn't do it when you went back to Russia?
I think I need to readopt it now and just try it in Boston, just see what happens.
You might be surprised.
I would be.
Yeah, I learned to be less sarcastic, and I found that to be a
Yes.
good thing, you know, because when you speak a foreign language, things don't come quite as easily as in the beginning, right? So everything you say takes additional effort, and you sort of have to evaluate whether it's worth the effort. And I realized
Mhm.
that a lot of times sarcasm for the sake of sarcasm is not worth the effort, and I started using less of it. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's good to be able to moderate rather than just spit it out on the spur of a moment.
that's a really good example. Yeah, I like that. Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, and after you finished that exchange year, what was the next step for you?
Went back to Russia, to Novosibirsk. I finished high school, our high school.
Our high school. Hmm.
Then I went to law school, actually. So I finished my law degree at the one of the universities there, and I was that was kind of my plan, and I was studying international intellectual property. That was my focus, and it was like a really great way to kind of bring my experience to this and everything. But I was also involved with Hillel, which is a Jewish student organization in Novosibirsk, right? So I was running the whole thing, and then I went to a summer program in California, and I learned about there was a job opportunity at the University of Illinois. They were looking for a Russian speaker to do outreach to like North Shore Jewish students. And so I applied for that, and the rest is history. Now I'm here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did they sponsor a visa?
Yep.
They did that. Wonderful. And
It was
when
quite a
you
bit of a thing. And then so they sponsored my visa initially there, and then I moved to Brandeis because it's the same program, legally speaking. And Brandeis then sponsored my green card. It was like one of those religious worker visas. They're
right,
generally like Catholic nuns and me.
and you.
Yep.
If we were talking to younger people today who are about to go to another country, what's your advice?
Read up and listen. So my niece Iris just went to Barcelona. She just graduated high school, and we chatted a little bit right before she went. And I think the best way you experience a foreign country is by taking it in and not necessarily bringing your whole self there, right? You take it in, take a couple days, and then you kind of start to interact after that. So that's my advice.
Right. And even bringing your whole self is not always, it doesn't always make sense because the things that mattered to us and to people in our home country don't necessarily matter at all here in
Yeah.
the States. You're sort of starting anew with a clean slate,
You're
except
like,
that
you've
you're several
traveled.
steps behind.
Yeah, exactly. You've traveled a lot. You know this, like me in a different country, other things matter, like when I go
Right.
to Mexico, it's a completely different situation, and I would never, but now I'm, older and wiser, so.
And when you say read up, what exactly do you mean? What to read up on?
So what I like to do before going anywhere is I read novels that are set in the place that I'm
Hmm.
going to.
Why novels?
Because I think it's made up enough that you don't take it too seriously. It's much better than a travel guide, but it still gives you a couple of points of interest.
It probably also highlights what's culturally important, right? The
Yeah,
values,
yeah, a little more
behavior
so
patterns.
than, I mean, travel guides are great. You should read those too, but novels are, it's easy. You read and then you kind of like, oh, I know this street. This street was mentioned in so and so.
Mm-hmm. Kind of
So,
gives your brain something to latch on to
yeah,
when
exactly.
you go
Like
places.
Anchor.
Except hardly anybody writes about some super remote places, right? No. Well, you can find some
But I
still.
mean, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go, like, yeah, I wouldn't say, like, before going to Kansas, you're probably not gonna read, like, Truman Capote. Like, let's keep
Probably
it
not.
fairly.
Okay. When did you realize that you were moving to the United States permanently, or that you were staying in the United States permanently?
That's a good question. There was never quite a point because I got that job at Illinois, and I knew it
Mm-hmm.
was a 2-year fellowship, so it had like a beginning and end, and I was just doing it. It was going well, and I was doing well, and I was like, all right, so then I have this other job that I can go to. And then it just kind of happened. So I never had like big goal, like, let's move to United States. That was never my plan, but it worked out well, and I've done okay so far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And when you were here in the States as a grown up already, how were things good, bad, difficult, interesting? Like, what were your impressions from your first years of living here as a grown up? And that was Illinois, and then it was at some point Boston, right?
Boston right after that, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like goes back to your previous question. I've always thought that culturally, this is my place.
mm-hmm.
And I've kind of jived with everything really, I mean, considerably well. Um, one thing also, going back to another thing we talked about, right? I would say that I've always avoided other immigrant communities and especially Russian speaking communities because I'm a firm believer in like when in Rome. Yeah, I went all in, and that's why I succeeded is because there was like, I live here now, this is what we do. If I go to Russia, like when I was visiting my parents, right? Like, I don't know, 5 years, 7 years ago, I do the same thing. I kind of like shut up for a day and just see how things are so
Mm-hmm.
that I don't appear, you know, condescending perhaps, because sometimes that can come off as, it's not
Right.
great. Like, I'm sure
But
you've done this with your like friends or parents, wherever, when you're like mid sentence, you're like, how do you even say this in Russian? And I'm not trying to be like fancy. I legit don't know the word.
right, because you only spoke on these topics in English. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of, I would say, even Russian speaking immigrants, when we meet up, we still speak English 70% of the time because life is in English, right?
Yeah.
And
My
unless we,
cousin in Columbus, like I've known her since I was born. We speak English 90% of the time to each other.
right, because that's just how things are.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you say we do this because this is what we do, could you outline again, maybe for for potential immigrants or for people who are just recently here, what exactly are the details other than like extending your hand or speaking up? What are other cultural things that are different, that are particularly American or East Coast American?
Hmm. I think everything is very situational. So you know that when you meet somebody for the first time, they're gonna say these three things to you, and you're gonna say the
Hmm.
three things back. Similarly, actually, tipping is another thing that drives me nuts. So,
Hmm.
with all of the Russian speaking communities, especially because again, you learn the culture of the place where you live, and if the culture is tipping 20%, you just do it and you go.
Right. Did you see any difference in how close relationships are formed, be it friendship, romantic relationships, even like, I don't know, colleagues who support each other or don't support each other?
Yes and no. I think I've heard again in the Russian speaking community, people chat a lot about like, oh, like Americans don't make friends the same way that we do and everything, but I don't think so. I have many close friends and 90% of them are American or English speaking. And it's all about the human connection. It's about finding the points where you have something in common versus playing that kind of waltz of like, I say this, you say this, you invite me to this, I invite you to this. No. Like, maybe you both love tennis. Go play tennis, right? Like, find something that's a little bit out of the way and you'll make that connection.
Did you ever think of maybe being one of those people who prepares this kind of programs? Because with your expertise, you should know a few things.
I would love that. Yeah. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
always thought that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so when you talk about getting to know people, right, interacting with people, do you do anything specifically to find those people to build this community around you?
I believe in food as a uniting thing for
Food is a
everyone.
uniting thing.
Yeah. So I meet people. A lot of my friends I've met in literally like in bars, but we've been now friends for over a decade. And then I host these like gigantic dinner parties.
Mm-hmm.
When I say gigantic, like this is my Cambridge apartment that is about 1,000 square feet, and I can host like 30 sit down dinner, long table.
How
And
did you learn that?
I just figured why not, and I tried, and I was good at it, and that was kind of that's it. And then everybody invited their friend, and then sometimes there are people I've never met, that come to my house to these dinner parties, and I love it so much.
Do
This
you
is
cook
where I
everything
shine.
yourself?
Hmm?
Do you cook everything yourself?
Yeah. Hmm.
Wow. Oh my God. That's that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
sometimes I have help. I mean, depending. Like we've had a few where, I needed like obviously needed support, but yeah, in general, yeah, everything. I cooked an entire suckling pig in my tiny oven, like поросенка.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yep.
Was cooking big in your family in Russia? Like, did
Not
your
at
parents
all.
teach you that? Not at all. It's all yours.
No. Zero. Yeah. Nothing.
Where does the
I mean,
interest
they
come
enjoy
from?
food, they cook food like it, but like normal, like what we're used to at home. None of this craziness.
That's amazing. Are you an extrovert?
I am, yeah.
You are.
In case you
Okay.
couldn't tell, yeah, I don't know.
No, just ascertaining it because some introverts mask really well, and hide it
Oh,
and
I
come
do
across.
have like I have one of those. I'm one of those people who like I'm super chatty. I'm all over the place, but I also need like a solid day of no peopling whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. That's why I have a cat, not a dog.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, dogs don't talk either.
That's true.
Right. So you do these dinners, and what is dinner en blanc? Was the thing that
Yeah.
I see in your Facebook once in a while? What is that?
Oh goodness. So Dinero Blanc is an international phenomenon
Hmm.
that started, I want to say 20 years ago in Paris, where a bunch of friends were meeting up and they all wore white and went on a picnic. Then it's spread across. Now it's in most countries in the world. And essentially, you sign up. You don't know where you're going. You don't know where it's going to be. You know it's going to be outside. You bring your table, chairs, tablecloth, food, everything with you, and you show up to a secret location that you find out the day of. And there's dancing, and there's music, and there's all kinds of things going on. So I ran Dinero Blanc in Boston for 7 years.
For
This
seven
is my
years.
second year of not doing it. It's actually happening next Saturday. I'm very excited to go as a guest.
But you don't know where you're going yet, right?
Oh, no idea. No,
No.
they wouldn't even tell me. I don't even ask. Like,
Why did you stop doing it?
I mean, it's a dinner party for 1,500 people.
A little
That
taxing.
was the last one I did was 1,600 in Boston. So I'm good. I'm like I paid my dues. Now I just show up and kind of like wave and smile.
That's really interesting. I wonder if they have the same thing in other cities. I don't think I've ever seen any advertisements
They have it
for.
in
They
LA. They
do?
have it. I for sure know they have it in San Diego. My friend
Huh.
Mark used to run the San Diego one. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they have
Yeah,
it
it
in
just.
Chicago. They have it in New York City. Yeah, they have it everywhere. It's a niche interest.
Mm-hmm. Food-based niche interest. That is true. I do know some people who would basically strike up conversations with strangers in new places by asking, "What's good to eat around here?" And then
Yeah,
it's just the most fun conversation ever.
yeah.
Right. And then there are some places, some cities, for example, I travel quite a bit for my work, but let's say I get to a place like El Paso and I start asking locals, hey, what's fun to see around here? And everybody starts telling me about the restaurants. It's just where you go to
Yeah.
eat. Yeah. Even though the city does have several museums, but apparently food is the thing.
I think with restaurants, it's so much more about socializing too than just the food. And food is an easy connection, right? Like
Right.
you like this, you don't like this. You don't even have to like have things in common. It's still a
You can still talk
conversation.
about it.
Whereas with something else, I think sports goes the same way. I just know nothing, so I'm
The
useless
fewer
in
people
that.
do
But
sports, yeah, then
yeah,
but everybody eats. Not everybody
exactly.
does sports. That's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Going back to the Russian thing, the Russian speaking, I always kind of say, I think being humble is
Hmm.
something that we didn't necessarily learn because we were taught to be like go, go, go. I know this, I know that. And like I remember in school, like in high school in Russia, like you really kind of have to demonstrate what you know. Whereas here, what I learned is much better to stand back, listen, and then see maybe what's going on. What do you
Hmm.
have to offer? Maybe nothing. Nothing is okay. Nothing is always okay.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I have a little bit different recollection from Russia, though.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, that definitely you are expected to come out to the blackboard and recite and demonstrate what you know if you're called on. But in general, there is a lot less trumpeting of your own horn, I would say, when I was growing up in Russia, as opposed to here in the States. You are supposed to be much more upfront about what you're offering,
Yeah,
and much less intimidated of saying, "Hey, I'm really good. I'm really, really good. I'm best. I'm the best." Like that sort of thing. So basically,
that's true.
right.
Yeah, I think those are parallel things. Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder what the kind of connection is there because that's a really important thing cross culturally
All right.
to kind of translate and learn, you know?
And it could also be that we're talking about different tracks within different cultures, right? Because in different environments, you are expected to do different things.
I think maybe I figured it out just for a second here. I
Mm.
think there's a difference between accomplishments, and that's where you speak up, and other people's opinions and ideas, and that's where you stand back and listen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
True.
that's the two tracks kind of here. Because I always think that, like for Dinero Blanc, right? So I had 50 plus volunteers. That was like kind of the group that I managed. I want to say half of them, not half. They'll listen to this and correct me, but a lot of them are from Haiti.
Mm.
I learned so much, so much. And I just, you know what? I just shut up and stood back and I was just like, you tell me. You tell me
Right.
how to pronounce your name. You might want to tell me like 7 times because this is hard. But I will
Mm-hmm.
listen and I will try and I will not assume that my opinion is the right one.
So, in those different communities that you've experienced, could you talk about maybe some the major differences? Maybe pick like one or two communities or three that you've been a part of, and talk about why you were a part of, what you like, what you didn't like, and the major differences between them. Maybe the community in rural Kansas, as opposed to Boston. What are the most striking differences?
That's a great question. I think, well, here in Boston, in Cambridge especially too, it's a very, very diverse world. Everybody, speaks a different language. There's a lot of different lifestyles. There's a lot of acceptance in general. And then if you go, even if I talk to my former classmates in Kansas, right, it's just more of a segregated community. It's not necessarily bad or good. They're just separate diasporas, like living separately from one another, and that's kind of a big deal. And sometimes I think it takes an extra step to explain things, especially of the differences. I was talking to actually to somebody, a Russian speaker here in Boston, explaining the Pride Month, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, like as our fellow countrymen often say, like, oh, like don't shove it in my face. I don't care what you do with whom, whatever. And I'm like, all right, cool. So here are the Stonewall riots. First, read about that, and then look at the Pride Parade, and then think about a military parade in Russia. It happens once a year. There are tanks on the street. You support the military, you don't always have a tank with you when you just go down the street. But once a year, you have a big parade and you have a tank. This is it. The Pride Parade is the tank.
Is the tank?
Like, yeah, it looks outrageous, but this is it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so is your freaking military thing down the street. So,
That's a very interesting take on on the
That's
question.
how, that's what I've been explaining. That's my
Mm-hmm.
go-to explanation these days.
Mm-hmm.
So
Would
I
you
think,
say?
yeah, it's like I like a community that's accepting and diverse. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big deal for me.
We kind of have to, right? As immigrants, it's where it's a
Yeah.
little easier, right? Would you say that people in those different communities necessarily watch the same shows, read the same books, understand the same jokes?
Jokes are the hardest, I think.
Jokes are the hardest.
Yeah.
Because that's something I keep hearing from like in the immigrant environment, that oh, you as a foreigner will never be part of their understand their jokes. You'll never be able to joke in a way that they understand, and you did not watch the same shows. And from what I see more and more is that people in different communities here in the States don't necessarily have exactly the same, um, I guess, points of references culturally.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. If you
right?
take like New Orleans and Buffalo, New York, those are some different jokes there, all right? Like this
Yes,
is we don't have
for
to go to
sure.
different countries.
Right.
So it's the same, but I remember, I mean, I don't remember what it was, but I remember the first time I made a joke in English and somebody laughed. I was like,
Yay! I
I
made
was like,
it.
I've been trying for years.
Okay. Wonderful. Anything that we have not discussed that you want to discuss?
No, but I think kind of like maybe I would mention the one thing we kind of talked about in preparation to this. I think the main advice and key is that idea of creating your own community,
Mm-hmm.
finding what you're passionate about. You're going to find the people they're passionate about the same exact thing, no matter what language they speak. You could be into CrossFit, you could be into cooking, you could be into painting, you could be into anything at all. You will always find, like, never limit yourself by language and by cultural barriers, because there are many other points of how we connect with one another.
Absolutely. And I think you have to be proactive in looking for those communities, right? Because they're not
Absolutely.
going to come looking for you, right? You need to put
Probably
yourself out
not. No.
there. Hopefully not,
Yeah, hopefully not exactly.
because that could be disturbing. Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me today and sharing your insights. It was fascinating.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So good to see you.
So good to see you.